Hi everyone, I'm Ella Fernandez, Head of Connections at BTechly. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Microsoft 365 Community Conference webinar series with our sponsor, Huntress. Today, they'll be sharing insights on cybersecurity threat landscape in 2026. Before we dive in, here are a few quick things to remind you guys of. Number one, to join the live Q&A, you'll need to register for the webinar. So if you're watching this across other channels and haven't registered yet, you may scan the QR code showing on your screen right now, or head to btechly.com, select today's webinar date, enter your business email address, and submit your registration. Our team will process it and add you to the Q&A chat at the end of the session. Please note that the Q&A won't be live streamed. If you haven't secured your conference pass for the Microsoft 365 Community Conference happening April 21st to 23rd in Orlando, this is the perfect time. Simply scan the QR code on your screen or visit nextgen365events.com and use discount code S150 to receive 150 off on your registration. If you've already registered or planning to register, you could be one of the 25 winners to receive free Epic Universe Part Passes on Sunday, April 19th. For the full contest details, eligibility, and updates, visit nextgen365events.com and head to the news tab. And of course, please like, subscribe, and follow both BTechly and the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. Without further ado, let's kick things off and enjoy today's learning experience.
Hey everyone, I'm Erin Myers, Principal Product Marketing Manager at Huntress, where I focus on identity threat detection and response, or ITDR. So over the past few years, attackers have stopped breaking into environments. They've started to log in. And the majority of real-world incidents now begin with a compromised identity as opposed to a compromised endpoint. To give you an example, last year, 78% of high and critical incidents that Huntress sent were identity related. And these were incidents in which the attacker often looked indistinguishable from a normal employee. This shift has changed everything. Prevention is easier to bypass, detection is harder, and response times matter more than ever. So today we're going to unpack what the 2026 identity threat landscape actually looks like. From modern business email compromise to adversary in the middle attacks to session token theft and the early impact of agentic AI on intrusion activity. The goal isn't just to understand the threats, but to understand how attackers are thinking so defenders can adapt. Allow me to introduce some folks from our identity threat detection and response team. First, we have Matt Kiley, Principal Product Researcher for ITDR.
Hello.
We also have Dave Kleinetland, also Principal Product Researcher for our ITDR team.
Hey.
And lastly, we have Rich Mozaleski, our Product Manager for our ITDR solution.
Hello there.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. So let's kick it off. 5 years ago, ransomware dominated the headlines. We all saw it. We all read it. Today, almost every incident starts with identity. So what's fundamentally changed?
Aaron, I'd say that more and more businesses are moving their data into the cloud. And so that's where the adversaries are starting to go now. And in order to take advantage of those cloud resources and to exfiltrate that data and put it on the dark web or expose it publicly, the threat actors have to compromise the identity now. Ransomware, is still a prevalent threat, and there's still lots of data on the endpoint and in a closet server somewhere. But more and more, we see data in M365. We see it in Google Workspace. Really, really sensitive data, intellectual property, PII data, health data. And in order to get to that, when it's in the cloud, the threat actor has to compromise the identity.
Yep.
So, little history lesson, right? Identity is not new to the cloud. It's not a concept that's specific to the cloud. It was applied as the main mechanism of authentication and authorization even back in the old closet server, Active Directory, Enclave days. But when cloud resource, there was kind of the shift, the lift and shift into cloud resources, and that brought with it the concept of identity as its primary authentication and authorization mechanism. Well, now you have accessibility across the widespread internet. The idea of cloud resources is that if I prove who I am, then I can access resources that I should have access to, right? Even if that proof is stolen, I can still access those resources. And so that is why it's like availability of the technology that's kind of led to this, right? So that's the at least the way that I like to view it. The central thesis is that identity is not a new concept, but moving identity into the cloud as its primary authentication mechanism is what allows threat actors unrestricted access to resources in some cases.
So what has, like, over the past year, what when it comes to identity attacks, what has surprised you?
Yeah, so really the main thing that's changed over the last year is the adversary infrastructure being used to launch attacks. By and large, the tradecraft itself has not changed that much. We are still seeing lots of session token theft. We're still seeing lots of password attacks. We're still seeing lots of post-compromise and post-exploitation activity in cloud resources. What has changed is the originating point of those attacks. So for IP addresses, there are 3 distinct areas that you can kind of rack and stack and classify IPs into. One would be the geographical location implied by the IP address. My apartment IP in San Diego, California has an IP address that says that I'm logging in from California. There is also the concept of the infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure that is representing that IP. And so an example of this would be if I am proxied through a data center, well, that IP address might be in Palo Alto, California, but my login could be from anywhere in the world, right? Because I'm kind of bouncing that through. And so there is this concept that in certain technological contexts, the geographical location of an IP address is completely irrelevant, right? So that's like another area that we need to consider. And then there is even a third place to look, which is the use of known VPNs and proxies, right? So there's kind of like not all data center IPs service VPNs, but several. I mean, the majority of VPNs are running on top of data center infrastructure, just kind of how it works out in terms of the technology. So attackers used to use VPNs and proxies, and every now and then just their complete, their regular IP address, like maybe from their home or their apartment or something like that. And so like before last year, the primary mechanism for the infrastructure was like VPNs or proxies. And we're seeing threat actors move away from that because it's so easily signaturable. It's very, very easy to say my users have never even heard of NordVPN, much less would be using it to log in. So that becomes anomalous activity. We look for that. We detect on that. We eject a hacker out of their context. But it's a lot harder to then say this data center IP that they're logging in from is anomalous, because data center authentication, even though you don't necessarily log in through data centers, that authentication kind of bounces to data centers a lot. So it's a lot harder to track down. So there's been a big shift. They're moving away from the VPN, the major VPN providers, and moving on to like self-hosted cloud VPS infrastructure.
Got it. So sort of layers of complexity. Is that why traditional security tools are struggling to keep up with identity threats?
Probably. it's just the complexity of the cloud space.
I think there's probably 2 sides. We talk about the complexity situation, right? There's a couple of things that it's a thing I like to call infinite configuration syndrome, right? If I'm a security tool and I'm trying to install it in an environment, I got to make sure I got to balance security with like inconvenience and stopping productivity of its users. Right, like the most absolute scared configuration would basically make it impossible to get any work done. So you got to find this right balance. But all that's complex in terms of like, is the configuration is complex? Am I buying all the correct licensing? Do I have everything configured and set up? Do I have people in the correct groups and stuff they need to be? So because of all that complexity, it's kind of hard to just kind of yeet a tool into your stack and hope that nothing really goes wrong. I think another side of that, of where traditional security tools might have some trouble, is a lot of the attacks that we see today, especially the ones that are born right out of like a phishing message. All that stuff's funneled through very well-known tools, right? Like they're abusing things like, file sharing, things that you use every day, something you couldn't just block. I don't want to single out any brands because they're all just under the same sort of abuse, but you can't very well block a tool that you use every day, like Microsoft Central Environment. You're probably going to use SharePoint and OneDrive. Well, you couldn't block that because no one will get anything done. So that's another side of that complexity there as well.
Interesting. So speaking of traditional things, BEC, been around for decades. I don't know about you, but I definitely received a few emails from a handful of Nigerian princes back in the day. And it used to be these obvious phishing emails that we were sent. Talk a little bit about what BEC looks like today. Is it the same?
Yeah, no, we've come a long way from the Nigerian prince email, right? Like and some of the other very obvious ones I remember of like, help, I'm your long lost uncle and I'm trapped somewhere. Please funnel me money to get home. And that it's come like a lot. And then, a lot of that was targeting, personal users and stuff like that. And trying to get one person's banking information and things like that. Today, especially kind of going back to what I said about using well-known tools, attackers are starting to learn like what tools you're using, what tools are common in like an industry. Like if we see something going in like a construction or a banking or a medical industry, they'll like to use some of the tools that are in that. A lot of things are pretty well standardized and known, the way that a lot of those industries communicate with each other. So an attacker can slip in using one of these tools, shaping something to look like another email that that you're supposed to be opening, right? Like if I send a resume to an HR department that's actually a payload, that HR department's supposed to be opening resumes, right? Like if they don't open resumes, they can't hire people, they don't get their job done. So we're starting to see very tailored phishing emails and lures and stuff like that specific to industry, sometimes even very specific to company if they've kind of been doing their own research and whatnot. Actually just finished a research project where I probably read, I don't know, a couple of thousand phishing emails over the course of 2 weeks. And one thing that really stood out to me was how customized almost each phishing email was. It's almost like they're using like a mail merge, like the same thing you would do in a marketing email, and fill in the blanks of like, it's the specific user's name, it's a specific vendor or company they work with. So it's I think a lot of the technology that we've used to make our lives easier is also in turn making it much easier to launch these more tailored campaigns and stuff to attack folks.
Are attackers using AI to achieve that level of customization?
I mean, I don't see how they wouldn't be. I mean, I'm certainly been, I'm definitely not the best wordsmith out there, so I've certainly been guilty of using some AI to make a letter sound a little bit easier or better worded. So I think that's probably where you're starting to see a lot of the obvious, the obvious phishing emails that, just had poor language patterns or misspellings or things like that. AI can whip up a really good phishing lure pretty quickly. So yeah, it wouldn't doubt me at all. I would expect them to be using it pretty fully by now.
Yeah, I would. There was one instance where the Huntress EDR got installed on a threat actor's laptop, and there's a blog post about it that we publish where you can kind of read the hilarity ensued in that case. We saw activity on, and obviously we're not the CIA, so we don't know exactly what attackers are doing in their dark corners of the internet before they launch the attacks. But every now and then, that was an example where we got a glimpse. And there was proof positive that they were using LLMs, ChatGPT, to the extent to perform different kinds of activities. Read the blog if you're interested. It's very fascinating stuff. That would be on the continuum of AI use, LLMs to get better at phishing, I think is maybe the best use case of LLMs at this point. The rest is kind of into this murky automation, agentic AI area. We're not totally sure how attackers are using that at this point. I think that's kind of an open question.
So curious, what roles do collaboration platforms or SaaS play in modern BEC?
Well, I mean, it's the environment, it's the playground essentially, right? So that's just like an enclave environment with Active Directory. I mean, that was the playground for, or still is, I should say, still is the playground for ransomware and command and control attack. attacks. Like SaaS is where the work is being done, right? So the Huntress product specifically covers the kind of productivity suite of Azure, which is Microsoft 365, right? So you think, where is the business being done these days? Right. And in addition to those enclave on-premise Active Directory networks, we also, I mean, you grab your browser or maybe like a client application, you log into your M365 instance, and there you have all your resources. That's where the business is being done, right? So that's exactly, it's the facilitating environment for all of the, where the money is made, where the business is being done. Those are all opportunities for attackers to score a payday.
So what's the difference between mailbox compromise and business process compromise?
Yeah, I can take that one. Just to kind of make it as simple as possible, I see the mailbox compromise more of like the smash and grab. I get in a mailbox and I kind of already have a predetermined set of things that I'm going to do, right? Like I know when I get this mailbox, we see attackers very quickly maybe, export all the contacts and immediately start a phishing campaign to send out more email from that mailbox without really spending much time about figuring out who this user is, what do they do, what's valuable. They just kind of get in and they just start, going for it. Whereas a business process compromise, they'll get in, they'll try to stay under the radar as long as they can, do no evil, try not to set off any alarm bells, and they'll start to collect information. They'll download, internal forms and stuff that you use. They'll download, they'll learn kind of language mannerisms and patterns and stuff that people use when they communicate. They'll learn, who do you have to reach out to, and then they'll slip into an existing conversation with maybe trying to redirect a wire transfer or payroll direct deposit changes, things like that. So they kind of lay in a while and just sort of figure out what's going on first before they just go for it.
So like what signals both like that we see and like a customer would see to show that a BEC attack is happening or has happened?
Your authentication telemetry, probably the first canary in the coal mine there.
The worst one to get is the, hey, I got an email from you, and
fair.
Please click this link.
Right, I didn't. Yeah,
true. If you look at it from like when the business, like not the IT admins or the security administrators would know about this, but like when the business personnel would find out about this, it's unfortunately when the massive amount of spam goes out from someone's compromised inbox, probably.
So a lot of organizations, out of fear of BEC, get an email security vendor. Does that stop BEC? Does that provide adequate protection?
I guess it depends on the vendor, of course. It depends on the technology. It depends on the telemetry and the visibility into it and how they layer defenses. I mean, I would never turn it down. Honestly, like more layers of defense is probably a good thing. But yeah, it very much depends on how just the telemetry that's available and the visibility and how detection is structured. Like those are the critical elements.
Got it. Moving on a little bit from BEC, something else that we think is going to be pervasive in 2026 is of course token theft. What is passive session token theft, like in plain English?
Yeah. So used to be my nemesis. So I have a B-sides presentation about this. If you're interested, maybe we can link that as well. So when it comes to token theft, what we're talking about here is the interception or the acquiring of the authentication material that results after you put in your password and if applicable, your multi-factor authentication. So for Microsoft 365, what happens is as a kind of usability feature, and this is common to a lot of different identity providers and OAuth platforms, as a kind of usability feature, there's usually like a little checkbox that says like, keep me signed in, sign me in for 45 days, something like that. What that does in a technical sense is when you put in your username and your password, the server that's responding to your request says, okay, here is a token. It's usually a long string of what look to be random characters. I'm eschewing some of the technical detail just to keep it high level. And that gets stored in your browser, right? And the next time you want to access resources, instead of having to put in your username and your password, your browser just says, hey, this is my token. Can I just access these resources? That gets checked against the server. Everything's okay in the normal cases. So the problem here is that even it could take one factor, it could take two factors, it could take 10,000 factors of authentication. As soon as you put in all of those authentication factors, whatever the nth factor authentication was becomes one factor, which is that token. The thesis of exploitation there is steal the token, and then you have the ability to get around any other manner of authentication, right? Now, passive and active assume either in the active case, someone is actively interacting with you. There's a social engineering attack. They're trying to hit you with a phishing lure. Or passive would be looking at credentials on a Telegram forum somewhere. Basically, somebody else did the dirty work, and now you're just either purchasing or finding the access there. So the shorthand for that I like to think is it's like pickpocketing versus dumpster diving, right? Active session token theft is like you are actively being pickpocketed, right? Passive session token theft is like, oops, you ran some malware and your credentials got scraped off of your file system, and now they're kind of floating around in a Telegram forum or the dark web or something like that, and somebody found those and replayed those. So that's the major difference between passive and active.
So does MFA stop that?
No. and don't get me wrong, like any MFA is better than no MFA, but like the primitives of exploitation here are themselves multi-factor authentication bypasses. Any number of multi-factor authentication methods that go into the generation of a token, it doesn't matter at that point. And there's some technical nuance for like phishing resistant MFA that we could talk about, but like in the general case, several factors of authentication all converge into a token. That token becomes, for all intents and purposes, one-factor authentication that you can then just, as an attacker, put into your browser and say, hello, I am this user, and then you authenticate.
All right. So I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the caveat to that is properly implemented, and I emphasize properly implemented device-bound tokens, passkeys, FIDO2.
Yeah.
Those will prevent token theft if they are implemented properly. I cannot emphasize that enough, because you can easily say, oh, I have passkeys everywhere, but if you still have SMS as a backup authentication method, then an attacker can bypass a passkey.
Even the designated phishing resistant MFA methods are not bulletproof. There are attack primitives. They are much harder to pull off if you are the attacker, but they do exist. So the even MFA phishing resistance is not particularly, or it's not completely bulletproof, I would say.
So why are attackers targeting browsers over credentials? Is it faster? Is it easier to perpetrate?
I guess like primarily it's just because the browser is where most of this like MFA credential token authentication material lives, right? It's very easy to find passwords out just, and people reuse passwords so much that, you know, if you find one instance of just a username and a credential, if that user is not using MFA, you're in at that point. That is the full attack. It's just logging in. But the browser has the authentication material for when those users are using MFA, right? So that is, and it's all transparent in the browser. Like that's the other part, is that it has to be ready to use when the browser is interacting with these servers, right? There's, to some extent, we can kind of encrypt credentials if they're on the file system in Windows. There's various levels of trying to obfuscate or hide credentials. But as soon as they go into the browser, like they have to be ready to be received by the server. And if you catch that in the middle of it happening, you get a plain text credential, either a token or the username and the password.
And another thing about the browser too is, outside of the most stringently controlled environments, the browser is almost wholly owned by the user. So you don't need to have special privileges to get whatever you want out of the browser in most cases. Someone can get control of something in the browser, then the user has the ability to do kind of whatever they want. So it's a pretty decent way to get in.
So how quickly can a hacker go from stealing a cookie to data access?
F12, copy, paste, enter in a lot of cases.
Real fast.
It depends on what you mean by data access, because like cloud resources in a general sense. Well, if you log in to the M365 login page, I mean, that is your email inbox right there. That's data access, right? So that's as soon as you refresh the browser, you're accessing the emails. From there, I mean, it's not hard. This is where the business, the common theme here, this is where the business is done. So it's not hard to just start browsing around at it. What do they use for SharePoint? What do they use for OneDrive? Like all of that is just kind of contained in that, the productivity suite of M365. So yeah, not a long time.
I mean, we've seen, I think we have anecdotes, and I'm sure it's faster too, but we've seen within like 45 seconds,
Yeah.
compromise, malicious inbox rule, malicious application installed.
And that time interval, like heavily, again, we're not the CIA. We don't quite know for sure, but that time interval heavily implies automated tooling, right? Like the way the signals are staggered, when we get a really nice clean set of signals that imply that an account takeover has happened, like the interval in seconds there, it literally is seconds in a lot of cases, like Rich just said. So either somebody was there waiting at the keyboard and has all the movements memorized. I think the more plausible explanation is that that's automation at work.
And on top of that, Aaron, the Microsoft in particular will not emit a log for 5 to 8 minutes after an event occurs. So you have a window as an attacker of several minutes to do whatever you want before anyone is going to catch wind of it, which is a very scary thought in today's age of automation and AI.
So that's my next question. Like from our standpoint, detection wise, is session hijacking harder to detect than like a stolen password?
Both of those evolve into account takeover, so they're almost indistinguishable, I would say. Because all right, so we got to assume that like a user without MFA, their password is compromised in some way or guessed, or they've reused it across. But that's just going to look like a login, right? And there could be any number of suspicious indicators about that login: geolocation, like I mentioned earlier, access from a data center, like I mentioned earlier, even the client ID, the thing that they are using to access to log in as this user could indicate in some cases. Session token theft looks very similar because it is just authentication. They're just moving around the methods of stopping that authentication from happening. I would say they look almost indistinguishable from each other.
So Kylie, do you think we are entering a post-authentication security world?
Whoa. I don't know.
Maybe.
It's hard to say, because authentication is still that is the whole concept of identity, is authentication and authorization. You are who you say you are, and you have access to the things that you should have access to, right? If we don't have that, we don't have the ability to administer cloud resource access at scale, right? So I guess like it depends on what we mean by post authentication. Like is the login going away is almost a philosophical question. I don't know if we could have cloud access without some kind of login. Or I guess is the question, is it shifting to things that are not passwords and usernames? Is it shifting to where you are? Those are kind of the nebulous esoteric questions, right? So I'm really not sure. It's a very interesting question.
Not anytime soon, we can say. Not in 2026.
Yeah.
Let's talk about adversary in the middle attacks. How did adversary in the middle phishing kits kind of change the economics of cybercrime?
I've been talking a lot, so I want to yield to my esteemed co-hosts here if they have any thoughts.
I mean, I think you see the proliferation of tools like Evil Jinx, which it's a pen testing red team type tool, but we see it used maliciously every single day. On the endpoint forever, it was Cobalt Strike, right? In terms of open source tools that were used for malice. I think in the age of AI, we've actually really started to see this already, but you'll start to see the proliferation of homegrown toolkits to aid an adversary in the middle compromises. Whereas it's not very easy. It's easier for us to determine if a toolkit like Evil Jinx is used or some of the big names that are out there. It's not easy at all if Matt Kiley as the threat actor rolls his own adversary in the middle toolkit, and then can use it for himself or sell that to other prospective users. And the ability for us as defenders to catch that in a world where, in a couple hours, I can spin up my own tooling and infrastructure. It becomes incredibly lucrative for the threat actors and incredibly difficult for us to detect.
Yep.
I would say in under a year, we saw a lot of parallels with the back end economy of the identity based cybercrime that we did in the ransomware. In the ransomware days, we saw people selling ransomware tools and having coupon codes for their campaigns and referral codes so they would get proper credit and stuff for that. We're starting to see that too with phishing kits being sold. Like you can just go in a particular dark corner of the web and purchase a phishing kit, put in your keys or whatever, and start funneling things through. We also see the different tiers of folks. We see there's the people who sell the kits. That's how they make their money. There's people who run the kits and get the initial access. They get all the tokens we've been talking about. Then they sell those tokens to someone else. And then those people do, so there are all these layers of how they're making money with it that they certainly start well before, trying to get money from the actual end user with a wire transfer or payroll scam.
Yeah, it's the economics of the cybercrime industry, and it's very, very similar to the ransomware initial access broker kind of paradigm. It's like phishing kits as a service are super common. Naked Pages is a good example of this, and they're leased out. There's like a small development shop of like a couple of people that put the code together and then lease it out. It's software as a service, just in the underground. Like it's the exact same model. They probably took inspiration from the ransomware rings and the initial access brokers from that. It's just fascinating stuff in the economics of the underground.
So common, yes. Is it fair to say that these attacks are sophisticated? Like, can I say that?
Okay, whoever came up with the first instance of the transparent proxy being used to intercept credentialed the actual interaction taking place. I mean, that is like straight up genius. Like that's crazy smart. What happens after that is that all of the lower tiered cyber criminals then just use that technology and repackage it and recode it and vibe code it and then sell that out. And that is could you call that sophisticated? The technique itself, I think, is super sophisticated, but the usage of that technique as kind of a copy paste hit run on a playbook kind of thing. I don't know. Can you call that sophisticated? Or if you have somebody that's just kind of following a playbook, it's hard to call that sophisticated in that case, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Going back, if you all remember, because we were all standing there in the same room together talking about how we were going to detect token theft. And we talked about it as being a more sophisticated attack. And I think we discovered very quickly that it's like you said, Matt, it's proliferated to the point, and you could probably get a YouTube 5-minute tutorial on how to conduct a token theft attack.
Of course you can. Go John Hammond's channel immediately. It's like one of his top videos. Go check it out.
That was 2 years ago. And we learned very quickly how ubiquitous these types of attacks are.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's only gotten worse in the years since we started looking at it.
There's a power law here of the really bright, brilliant researchers on both sides here. I'm talking like the criminal underground and the open source kind of like threat intelligence and threat researchers who are coming up with surfacing the techniques and tactics and procedures. And that is a very small percentage. And everybody behind them is me, the kind of idiot in the room who's like, man, that's really cool. I bet I can use this, right? So there's a power law distribution. A small percentage of researchers and technologists are coming up with like the original ideas, and then those get propagated into mass rollout.
Okay, let's talk about living off the land identity abuse. First, Rich, can you explain what this means in SaaS environments?
I would describe that as we see quite a bit of, you will have in one Microsoft tenant, for example, one compromised identity or maybe several. And an attacker will use that as a launch pad to bypass your traditional email filtering, seem more legitimate as a legitimate user. The common attack that we see is a shared document from SharePoint. No email filter is going to really pick up on that. And now you as an attacker have this launch pad of, you can upload into this compromised SharePoint environment however many malicious files you want, with all sorts of flavors of ridiculous malware, and then share those out. And you're bypassing a lot of traditional email filtering. And it seems more legitimate because the victim is going to get an email saying, Bob shared this SharePoint document with you. Click here. It's a Microsoft link. And next thing you know, you have downloaded a cred stealer or, Akira ransomware or some other flavor of badness. And that is, it's easy to compromise an identity, and it's one more step to then use the resources that identity has access to against other tenants or other identities.
How frequently are we seeing attackers abuse legitimate features in Microsoft and Google against an organization? Is this common? Will this continue?
It's almost definitionally happening every time. The idea of living off the land comes from the kind of endpoint realm, where it's instead of bringing custom written malware, instead of writing your own executable for command and control, you're going to use PowerShell. That's already there. It's already installed. And there's several reasons why an attacker would want to do that, but they have a choice. They're either rolling up with their own custom malware, or they can use what's already there. The SaaS environment is just workflows and access to emails, and using what's already there is the whole it's the whole environment, I guess, right? So almost definitionally, every time that an attacker accesses emails or uses an inbox rule to inject themselves into a conversation, that's all kind of living off the land. The land is the whole environment, the whole set of resources that allows them to do that.
Interesting. So how do hackers maintain persistence without, expanding and creating accounts?
Most common that we see is introducing an OAuth application, a third-party application, because by default users are allowed to install ones that kind of only affect themselves. Very common we've seen is alternative webmail style clients, maybe you don't like OWA or something like that, and there are third-party ones that you can use. And when that connection is made, by default, users can do it without admin permission. Attackers will convince a user to do it. It's in a very similar process where the user being fooled into installing that is only seeing legitimate, Microsoft or identity provider pages to do it. And once that connection is made, it'll survive password resets. It doesn't, it doesn't trip the we created a new user to do things or stuff like that. So that's probably the most common one I think that we see.
Yeah.
MFA
Matt, if you've
edition.
got any to add.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Adding an MFA device.
Edition.
Yep.
There's some kind of more niche, more complicated stuff. It depends on the platform, but Active Directory Federation services is one in Azure specifically, where you can add an authentication mechanism. Basically, there's some more red teamy spooky stuff, but the common ones are OAuth applications and multi-factor authentication ads.
Got it.
And just hanging on to the credential and the password. I mean, when you steal a token, you get both the access token itself, which is the thing that allows you to access the resource. And in some cases, in most cases, you get the refresh token as well. And the refresh token is an access token printer. It basically says, once your access token is done, just present this and you'll get a new access token. If you hold on to that, you have persistent access. There are some access tokens that are good for 90 days, right? In some cases. So that's also persistent access.
So let's talk AI. Favorite topic.
Everyone's favorite.
I know, everyone's favorite topic. How like, what would you say is most substantial when it comes to AI changing how hackers behave?
It's a force multiplier for them. It is, if you think at the most basic level of just serving as a, David mentioned it was helping him with some emails, or writing documentation. For the majority non-English speaking threat actor community out there, not just non-English speaking, like whatever language you'd like, whatever language your victim speaks, you can type your prompt into an LLM and spit out, a perfect translation of what you're trying to convey. It's come a long way from the, highly typoed Nigerian Prince email that you mentioned, Aaron, previously.
Right.
And that's just the simplest use case. I mentioned using, Claude Code to vibe up your own adversary in the middle toolkit. That's entirely possible today. There's as much as it's a tool to help productivity and kind of advance what we're trying to do in our industry, threat actors are using it as well.
So you mentioned it as a force multiplier. Are attackers actually automating post-compromised activity and actions?
Well, I think I said earlier that it is based on telemetry and incidents that we've studied. It is heavily implied that there is some kind of automation going on. The mere fact that a initial access happens and 10 seconds later an application is installed or an email inbox is written, I mean, that is heavily that's really substantial evidence that there's automation. Whether that is AI, whether that's agentic, whether that is insert buzzword, I have no idea. It could easily be scripted with a Python script. It could easily be scripted with just, basic scripting knowledge. Are attackers expanding into AI? I would ask, why would they need to put AI on the map in an active intrusion if they could script the activities that they're trying to pull off? I mean, I would just ask why in the first place, right? Using AI to prepare your tools, I'm sure everybody is doing that, right? Using AI agentically in the middle of an intrusion for automation, I would ask, what is the real benefit of that over just understanding your workflows, your playbooks, and implementing those as scripts?
The other attack surface that I think right now I hear a lot of like, my employees using third-party AI tools and throwing all of our, corporate data in there, which is a huge problem. But the attacker side of that is, attacker gets access to an identity that has a Copilot license and now can use Microsoft Copilot to streamline, type in, find me all emails with the word invoice. And now the enumeration and the post-compromise activity that might have taken you, minutes to hours to complete, you can have Copilot complete for you. And now you can find all the invoices. You can find all the sensitive data. Living off the land, again, that concept we talked about earlier. If the identity has access to it, the threat actor can gain that same access.
So, I mean, we've talked about all of these attack vectors, and particularly with AI, like, what are organizations supposed to do? Like, with all of these advancements and the speed with which AI is able to perpetrate attacks, like, how can organizations set themselves up for success to combat these things? Like, what are some steps they can take?
Typewriters. No.
Right.
I think it starts with, having that good security posture, not just within the tenant itself, but the humans, right? If all of us are susceptible to a really good phishing war. But what we see a lot of users that get compromised a lot repeatedly, right? Because they continue to click on the phishing links. And ultimately, you can have the greatest security posture in the world and the most locked down tenant. But if you have a human that will just click on anything, then you have a weak link there. And so there's like a holistic view of, you got to have a really locked down environment. Your humans have to be trained. You need a solution for when you get compromised, because it's a when, not an if. And you have to approach it from every angle. And that's unfortunately just it's that, or you go to typewriters, really. And that's the unfortunate reality of the world that we live in today.
I think I have a typewriter in my attic.
That's awesome.
I know, right? Okay. What do you guys think attackers will stop doing entirely in the next few years? Has it been successful? Takes too much time? What do we see stopping? We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about like the malware landscape and how that's shifted like from the 90s through the 2000s into the 2010s and now. And like malware used to be, there used to be almost like like an art to it, right? Viruses, worms, things that people just kind of generated that were nuisances, right? All of that went away when people realized that there are economics behind cybercrime, right? And that's kind of where I'm looking, is that wherever the business is done, there are avenues of cybercrime to be had. And wherever the business evolves next, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't exactly know, but I know that like the things that are not immediately and immediately profitable in an efficient, scalable manner are not going to be avenues of attack anymore. We don't see any more viruses that just say that spawn a million checkboxes and say, click all of them or else, your computer's going to get deleted or something. That went away when people realized that, oh no, we can like do ransomware now and make money off of it. So I don't quite know what's going to phase out, but I know that the things that phase out generally are the things that do not service the economic cyber criminal underground.
All right. Conversely, what current security control will become obsolete?
I mean,
go ahead, Dave.
It might be lacks of certain controls that, like to not be using MFA in 2026 is just insanity to me. Like I don't know that it'll be. I know, like it's one of those things where it'll be the lack of doing something will probably what needs to become obsolete versus, what existing technology. Like I know there's a big push for like passwordless, and I love passwordless. I'm a big passkey guy. I always fight with password managers and stuff anyway. So the security keys and pass keys and stuff like that. But those have logistics attached to them that aren't always practical and stuff as well, right? Users lose security keys. Maybe they don't want their company putting MDM or pass keys on their phone. So now you got to issue device, so, but yeah, I think what we'll probably see more is the lack of doing things will come at a greater penalty than they have previously.
Okay, we're almost at time. So I'll ask each of you, what is the single highest impact change organizations should make this year when it comes to identity and cybersecurity?
I will say, I'll just double tap with what Dave was saying. Implement MFA, implement a not Wild West BYOD policy. It's easier said than done. Obviously, like total control of all endpoints and identities is non-trivial. But from our data, only like 20% of logins are coming from registered devices within Entra. We had a proliferation during COVID of BYOD everything. And that makes detection of adversary activity very difficult. I said two things. I apologize.
There you go. It's the two things. Every time, in my circle of friends and family and whatnot, they're like, you're the computer cybersecurity guy. Like, what's the cool, sexy thing I need to do?
So and dinner parties.
Right. But I always come in the same, they always want to know what the cool, like sexy top of the line thing you need to do is. And I always have the same boring answer. Regardless of all this new technology, whether it's AI this or passwordless that or all these new things that are coming, never forget the basics. Most of the time when we see people get compromised, it is very often, sure, some of it is they were tricked by a clever phishing email, but a lot of it is a misconfiguration, not using baseline security standards, not practicing defense in depth, things like that. Auditing and testing your posture controls and stuff you have place. So the one liner for that is just don't forget the basics. They're really, really where everything starts. And if you don't have those set up right, whatever you add on top of it, not going to be as effective.
Yeah, that's it. I don't think I could have phrased it better. Raise the technical barrier to entry for attackers. Like, that is the end of the day. Is, unfortunately, we are in the business of putting the bar, the big bicycle lock on our bicycles when we're storing them downtown somewhere, right? And like, if your gigantic bicycle lock is really, really tough to break through with a saw, like, an attacker's just going to go somewhere else, right? Raise the technical barrier to entry. That's everything from investing in your humans and teaching them and getting them to understand the attacks and how they unfold. That's looking at the blast radius of any given compromise and how many resources can one individual access in an assumed breach scenario, right? That's really what it boils down to. Is when you don't use MFA, your technical barrier to entry is on the floor, right? When you do use MFA, that's a little bit higher, but it's not perfect, right? What other ways can you bump up that technical barrier to entry? That's what it's all about.
Mic drop. You heard it here first. Raise the technical barrier. That's all the time we have. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And now we will head to Q&A.
All right. Oh my gosh, that is a very insightful discussion. Thank you so much, Matt, Aaron, and Rich, Dave, for that. And to everyone watching on the live stream, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be wrapping up the stream shortly. Be sure to lock in your spot at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference happening April 21st to 23rd in Orlando. Register now by scanning the QR code on your screen or head to nextgen365events.com. Use the discount code S150 to receive $150 off on your registration and be one of the 25 winners to receive free Epic Universe Park passes for Sunday, April 19th. Full details are available at nextgen365events.com under the News tab. Now, if you'd like to participate in the live Q&A with Matt, Dave, Rich, and Aaron, be sure that you join us using the link provided in your calendar invite. Bye.